Hi, I'm Rahul Basu from the Goenchi Mati movement. In previous episodes, we looked at the overall five principles as well as how mining was resulting in huge losses. Today I'm going to talk about what really happened in Goa, especially with the Supreme Court case and subsequent events. But let's just quickly go through the five principles once again. You can see them right next to me. The first principle is minerals belong to the people of the state and future generations, and the state is merely a trustee for us. Second is we've inherited the minerals, so it's our duty and obligation to make sure that our children and future generations also inherit the minerals or their value. It's basically like family gold. The third principle is that in the process of mining, we're effectively selling our minerals. So we must get its full value, or the state must ensure it gets the full value on behalf of the people. The fourth principle is that everything we've received from selling our family gold, we must save into a new asset. Obviously, we can't save it in something like a car because our children will not inherit a car then. But we are specifically asking for it to be invested in a permanent fund, like a huge pension fund for the people. And lastly, since the minerals were owned by everybody, the permanent fund is also owned by everybody, and any income that's available from the fund should be just simply distributed equally to everybody in the state of Goa as a right of ownership. So these are our basic five principles. Now let's look at what's been happening in Goa and just like a quick history coming up to the events in the last 2 or 3 years. Mining in Goa started after World War II while the Portuguese were still in control of Goa. And this was a big source of both employment and foreign exchange in those days. Employment particularly because mining was done by pickaxe and spade, and it was transported initially even on heads of children and on bullock carts and sailboats down the river. So it was a big generator of employment. Over the decades, employment in mining dropped dramatically as mechanization of various kinds came in. Trucks was the obvious first point of mechanization. Mechanized barges were put into place, and over the years, for instance, barges have gone from an 800-ton barge to a 2,400-ton barge. So the amount of employment in mining has been gradually reducing. Now, mining has also gone through a variety of cycles and has been through ups and downs. There have been a couple of busts in mining in the late 70s and in the late 1990s when mining almost came to a stop. But since the early 2000s, mining took off again, and the real spur came with the Beijing Olympics when China was building a huge amount of infrastructure, and infrastructure requires a lot of iron. And iron demand soared and iron prices soared in conjunction. Now, what we witnessed in Goa was a huge increase in the amount of mining, and it became sort of a mini gold rush, and all kinds of rules were being flouted in the thing that, let's get the mineral to China while the Olympics are still in the future, because there is a demand, and let's try and fulfill the demand, and we'll figure out the laws later. As a result, we had a boom in environmental damage. We had a massive increase in corruption in the state, and there was also a huge upsurge of public interest litigation, protests on the streets, and people were generally very unhappy with mining. Things came to a head in 2010 and 2011. The government of India put in place the Shah Commission. It's a commission of inquiry under the Commissions of Inquiry Act. And Justice Shah was a retired justice of the Supreme Court. They submitted the report into end of 2011. And in 2011 also we had Manohar Parrikar, who was then the leader of opposition, submit the Public Accounts Committee report to the Legislative Assembly. And in that report, the PAC alleged that some 3,500 crores was recoverable was the extent of minerals which had been exported without paying any royalty and was therefore recoverable. The PSC report also said quite stunningly that irregular mining is nothing but illegal mining, and there's no such thing as irregular mining. On the back of corruption charges in mining especially, but also in a number of other areas, in the 2012 elections in February, the Congress was voted out and the BJP came into power. And they were promising a cleanup of the system. But nothing really happened until on the 9th of September 2012, the Shah Commission report on Goa was placed in the Parliament and was then a public document. There was an instant uproar. The Shah Commission documented a whole variety of illegalities, and pretty much every mine in the state of Goa looked complicit in one or the other kind of illegality. On the 10th of February, the state government imposed a ban on mining pending inquiry into the findings of the Shah Commission report. 12th of September, the Ministry of Environment and Forests in Delhi put a ban on mining, and very soon afterwards, Goa Foundation filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court on the basis of the Shah Commission report and a number of other findings that and research that Goa Foundation had done over the years. The basic grounds for the Goa Foundation public interest litigation were actually a few. First were the variety of allegations and the findings of the Shah Commission report. One of the findings, to remind you, was that at the approved rate of extraction and the known reserves, the minerals in Goa would be finished in 9 years, leaving nothing for future generations. Goa Foundation separately also filed 23 scientific studies to show how mining had damaged a whole variety of aspects of the Goan environment, agriculture, the khazans, which are a heritage agricultural system, health of the people, and a variety of kinds of damage. The Goa Foundation also showed that the process of mining was resulting in unfair enrichment of the few miners and a loss of public wealth, and which was also not fair both to the people today as well as future generations. Well, the case was heard from October 2012 all the way up till April 2014, when the final judgment came out. And the final judgment of the Supreme Court had a number of very interesting features, but let me highlight a few of them. First and most notably, the Supreme Court insisted on the implementation of intergenerational equity, or essentially the idea that the assets we've inherited in form of minerals, the associated forests, as well as the overall environment of Goa must carry forward to the next generation, because all generations have a right to it. This was implemented through two orders. The first one being the imposition of an interim cap on mining of 20 million tons. 20 million tons was decided or recommended based on two different criteria. The first criteria being the extension of the life of the mineral from 9 years, as Shah Commission found, to about a 30-year period. That's what it works out to. The second one was to limit, by reducing the amount of mining in the state of Goa, was to limit the amount of environment damage that was caused. So the 20 million ton cap was imposed on grounds of intergenerational equity. The other important thing from the Supreme Court was the creation of a permanent fund, the first in the country and the first by judicial order, and this was to be financed by a new levy of 10% of the value of minerals. So this was one prominent set of directions in the Supreme Court judgment. The other very significant direction and order or result of the Supreme Court judgment was that they said all mining in the state of Goa, all the leases had expired on 22nd November 2007, and therefore all mining in the state of Goa after that date, right up to the ban on the 10th of September 2012, all of the mining was 100% illegal. Now, this has two significant fallouts. The first fallout is that illegal mining is nothing but theft from the people, and in the case of theft, you have to either recover what was stolen or its value. Now, obviously, the mineral has gone to China, so what must be recovered is the value of the minerals, which Goa Foundation calculated conservatively at 65,058 crores. So, the Supreme Court said that all mines were illegal and therefore there were no mines in place, and the Goa government had a free hand to redesign a mining system with absolutely no vested interest. Really a golden opportunity, a clean slate in a sense. So just to recap, 4 things: a 20 million ton interim cap, a permanent fund, 65,000 crores plus recoverable from mining companies, and a clean slate for a new mining system. Now, the BJP government under Manohar Parrikar were given a golden opportunity, a once in a lifetime kind of an opportunity to change things for the better. What really happened was very surprising. Within 5 days of the judgment, the mining companies were back in the High Court alleging that despite the Supreme Court judgment, they still had a right to lease renewals, and they in fact in a matter of 2 months won a High Court order which stated the same. The Goa government actually strongly opposed the contention of the mining companies in the High Court, but decided for whatever reason not to appeal in the Supreme Court. Goa Foundation has stepped into their shoes, but that's for a later date. What the Chief Minister and Minister of Mines Manohar Parrikar did instead was to issue a statement in the Legislative Assembly of Goa and essentially said that we have 3 options as a state in front of us. The first option is to give mining leases, give fresh mining leases through an auction process. Clearly, an auction process would get us more money than giving leases out on a royalty basis, because auctions are on top of the royalty and everything else payable under the regular leases. The second option that they discussed was the idea of forming a state mining corporation and doing the mining in that. And the third option was to renew the leases to the same people who were found to have done mining illegally for 5 years. Manohar Parrikar went on to say that if we do auctions, and by the way, the BJP just a few months earlier for the Lok Sabha elections in their manifesto said that all natural resources would be granted only through auctions. Forgetting that or completely ignoring their own party stand, Manohar Parrikar says that if we do auctions, we'll get more money, but we have the risk of the unknown mining mafia coming into the state, and that can cause enormous damage as was experienced elsewhere. Of course, the most basic question is, can the mining mafia be worse than 100% illegal mining for 5 years and extensive environment damage and extensive corruption and misgovernance all over the state? Difficult to see, and if the Chief Minister of the state was unable to control the mining mafia, however unknown it might be, then surely it's his obligation to resign. Of course, that's in an ideal world. The second option of doing mining through a public sector undertaking was shot down on the grounds that it will lead to inefficiency and corruption. Of course, ignoring the point that we had, again, 5 years of illegal mining, and over an 8-year period, Goa Foundation has shown that we were losing 95% of the value of our minerals. Can the inefficiency and corruption be worse than this? And again, if the Chief Minister of a state is unable to run a mining corporation, a state-owned mining corporation better than that, then surely again it is time for him to step down. Anyway, they went ahead and renewed the leases with, we must say, very little opposition within the Legislative Assembly. The actual process of renewing the leases took place over a few months, under again fairly murky circumstances. The first thing the government did was to issue a draft Goa mining policy or mining lease renewal policy. Under the draft policy, which was very clearly a draft because it required approval of the finance department and some other people, the government started renewing mining leases. It started on about the 6th of November while Manohar Parrikar was still Chief Minister, and carried on in a very slow manner all the way up till about the 5th of January 2015. About 25 or 30 leases got renewed in this period. On the 5th of January 2015, there was reports in the newspaper that the central cabinet had approved a mining ordinance, and the mining ordinance would no longer permit renewals of mining leases. Now this was clearly a problem, because if the mining leases were not renewed, then the outstanding claim on the leaseholders would still be due. So between the 5th of January and the 12th of January. 12th of January, 1 week later, was when the ordinance was actually issued, enacted. So in those 7 days, there was an enormous burst of productivity in the mines department. 56 leases got renewed in those 7 days. And prior to those 56 leases, a total of 32 leases had been renewed. So a massive amount of work got done in those 7 days. And in fact, on the 12th of January, when the ordinance had already been notified in the Gazette, 31 leases were renewed on that very day. And most interestingly of all, the final mining policy of the Goa government was notified on the 20th of January, which was well after the date of after all the leases had been renewed. And on 20th of January, lease renewals were no longer possible under the mining laws. So the whole policy itself was infructuous despite being notified. This is clearly, just a way to beat the renewal sort of deadline. 31 leases on the date of the ordinance, 56 leases were renewed when the Goa government, despite having said they would only do renewals as an election matter, went and renewed it where they could have waited for 1 week. But what was the overall impact of this? Let's take a look at that. So let's try and understand what this really means for us. Firstly, by backdating the lease renewals, we've effectively given up, or the BJP government has given up our claim of 65,000 crores. That's 4.5 lakhs for each person, or a family of 4. The BJP government, by renewing these leases, has given up 18 lakhs for each family. The second thing is that the leases were renewed for 20 years, so from 2007 till 2027. Now the leases were renewed in 2015, so that meant 12 years were left for further extraction in the leases. Goa Foundation calculated that based on the historical value of the mineral as well as the approved extraction limits for these minerals, there would be an additional loss of 79,000 crores over the remaining 12 years of the lease. So the total loss from renewing the 88 leases works out to 1,44,000 crores. Let me repeat that. 1,44,000 crores. 144,000 crores. Each one of you in Goa, each one of us in Goa has lost 10 lakhs. A family of 4, 40 lakhs. This is the equivalent of losing 4 years of income for the entire state of Goa through one decision. One decision in a government's 5-year term, and they've given up 4 years of our income. Different way to look at it, 144,000 crores, the current Goa budget is about 10,000 crores. So this is about 15 years of the Goa budget. If this takes place, just consider this. If they have got 10 lakhs a person, 40 lakhs for a family of 4, if at the time of election they come and promise some of the voters even 1 lakh a person or 2 lakhs for a family, they've still benefited by 38 lakhs, while we feel very happy that we have got a doubling in the amount of from maybe 50,000 to 1 lakh. They are laughing to the banks, and we essentially are going to be slaves of these miners and politicians for the rest of our lives. It's really time. We must stand up. We have to stop this. Please join us. Please support the Goenchi Mati movement and stop this kind of loot. Or Chor 144.